Samsung's Galaxy Ultra line has defined what it means to own an Android flagship for years. It was the phone you bought if you wanted the best of everything. But Google's new Pixel 10 Pro XL is shaking things up in a way that has Samsung fans on edge. The real question is simple. Is the Pixel the new face of Android? We used both phones as a daily driver, played plenty of Fortnite, and of course took hundreds of photos to figure out just how well the Pixel compares to Samsung's flagship. Let's talk about it. If you put these two phones on a table side by side, you'll immediately notice the different design philosophies at play. The Pixel 10 Pro XL borrows from Apple's design language with its flat sides, rounded corners, and glossy aluminum rails. It feels sleek, reflective, and more comfortable to hold thanks to slightly curved transitions between the frame and the display. The Galaxy S25 Ultra, on the other hand, embraces sharp lines and squared-off corners. Samsung's matte titanium frame feels tougher and gives the device a bold, industrial look. Both backs use matte glass, both look premium, and both feel expensive in the hand. And of course, both phones have the same IP68 rating, means that you can submerge the phones with no issue. The Pixel's camera bar is still one of the most distinctive design features in the industry. Not only does it keep the phone from wobbling on a flat surface, but it also doubles as a surprisingly practical finger rest when you're scrolling. Samsung's minimalist floating camera rings don't stand out in quite the same way, but ultimately it comes down to whether you prefer the Pixel's more ergonomic design or Samsung's sharper, more brutalist approach. The Pixel has a 6.8-inch LTPO OLED display panel, while the Galaxy comes with a 6.9-inch AMOLED, and both hit 120Hz refresh rates. The Pixel takes the win for raw display brightness, pushing up to 3,300 nits, while the Galaxy only gets up to 2,600 nits. Samsung counters with its excellent Gorilla Armor 2 glass and a strong anti-reflection coating, which makes its screen very usable outdoors even if it does not quite match the Pixel in sheer brightness. The Pixel sticks with Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on both sides of the phone, but whichever way you look at it, both displays are among the best in the industry. They are crisp, vivid, and have barely their bezels. It's very hard to pick the better speakers. The Pixel has noticeably improved over previous generations with fuller stereo sound, while the Galaxy pushes louder. Depending on your taste, you might prefer the bassier sound of the Pixel or the higher volume of the S25 Ultra, but neither will disappoint when watching movies or gaming. On paper, Samsung has the advantage in camera specs. The S25 Ultra is armed with a 200 megapixel main sensor, a 50 megapixel ultrawide, a 50 megapixel telephoto with 5x zoom, and a 10 megapixel telephoto with 3x zoom. That gives you 4 lenses to cover pretty much every situation. The Pixel 10 Pro XL keeps things a bit simpler with a triple camera system consisting of a 50 megapixel main shooter, a 48 megapixel ultrawide, and a 48 megapixel telephoto, also with 5x zoom. So, you'd expect the Galaxy to be the clear winner, but the reality is pretty surprising. When you shoot ultrawide at 12 megapixels, the Pixel can actually produce slightly sharper results than the Samsung. Switch to 50 megapixels and the roles reverse, with the Samsung coming out ahead. We've seen this trend on other Samsung phones as well, and it's definitely worth shooting with higher resolutions on Samsung's phones. On the main camera at 12 megapixels, the Pixel tends to over-sharpen while Samsung looks more natural, though the Pixel often picks up a bit extra detail as well. At full resolution, the story flips again, and surprisingly the Pixel's 50 megapixel JPEGs look more detailed and less overcompressed than Samsung's 200 megapixel JPEGs. Shooting in RAW makes the difference even clearer, with Google's sensor usually producing clearer results than Samsung's monster 200 megapixel camera when handheld. We noticed that the 200 megapixels are only worth it when shooting with a tripod at the lowest ISO. It's important to mention that Google's RAW photos are clean without software processing, while competitors like Samsung or Apple still apply some sharpening and noise reduction even when shooting in RAW. This is a big advantage for the Pixel if you're looking to edit your photos in Lightroom completely from scratch. Portrait mode is tricky. The Pixel 10's photos are much more detailed, since you can use portrait mode with 50 megapixels while the Galaxy only manages 12 megapixels. However, once the edges are a bit more challenging, like when you have lots of hair on the picture, the edge detection from Samsung is much better. Selfies are excellent on both devices with 4K resolution, although the Pixel has the advantage of a wider angle lens. Low light photography is another strong point for Google. The S25 applies aggressive noise reduction even in RAW, which can make clothes and textures look way too smooth. The Pixel captures more natural looking RAW photos, and when you do brighten them in editing software, it retains more texture and detail. But you also do see a lot of noise, of course. JPEGs and low light are pretty similar on both devices. Let's talk about those zoom cameras. With the 5x telephoto cameras, the Pixel again outperforms in 12 megapixel mode, while Samsung leads in 50 megapixels. The Galaxy S25 Ultra does have the advantage of having an additional 3x zoom lens. Now, Google has a new party trick. The Pixel 10 Pro XL can zoom up to 100 times using generative AI fill to fill in missing details, while the S25 Ultra uses less aggressive AI upscaling. And the results are pretty controversial. On one hand, you can get surprisingly sharp and accurate looking photos of landmarks or nature that you would not expect at such extreme zoom, but on the other hand, many shots clearly have an AI generated look with odd artifacting and nonsensical details. Google at least saves the original non-upscale photo alongside the AI version, but we don't know whether to feel excited or uneasy about this feature. At least it's optional. Also quite practical is the fact that there's a mode for simple long exposures, which works pretty well. In addition, Google's Add Me function lets the photographers step into the photo themselves. It works surprisingly well, and Samsung doesn't offer either of these features. Now, in terms of video, the S25 Ultra is quite a bit ahead of Google. No matter which camera and frame rate, videos taken on the Pixel feel a little bit stuttery and have a slight rolling shutter effect in motion, while the Galaxy S25 Ultra does a far better job. The video stabilization is also pretty weak on the Pixel. In summary, the Pixel makes for a better point-and-shoot camera experience, but Samsung wins in video. Samsung has once again secured Qualcomm's most powerful chip, the Snapdragon 8 Elite 4 Galaxy, paired with 12 to 16 GB of RAM. The Pixel 10 Pro XL uses Google's own Tensor G5, which is made on a similar 3nm process but focuses more on AI rather than raw horsepower. The Pixel starts with 16 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage, but tops out at 512 GB, while the Galaxy can go all the way up to 1 TB. In everyday use, you probably won't notice a huge difference in speed. Both phones are smooth when swiping around the interface and switching between apps. The real gap shows up in gaming and benchmarks. In Geekbench, the Pixel trails the Galaxy by 20% in CPU single-core and about 40% in multi-core tests. But the GPU performance difference is even crazier. The Galaxy doubles the Pixel score in 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, and that translates to real-world gaming performance where the S25 Ultra runs Fortnite at well over 100 frames per second at max settings, while the Pixel is locked at 60. We saw the same performance on the last-gen Pixel 9a, which really isn't very inspiring. Google does deserve some credit for stability. In stress tests, the Pixel holds onto more of its peak performance over long sessions than Samsung does with a stability score of 59%. Surface temperatures stay about the same on both phones at around 44 degrees, so you don't really get a cooler device with the Pixel, but you do get more consistent performance. Still, if you play a lot of demanding 3D games, the Pixel is a pretty terrible choice, while the S25 Ultra is perfect for that. Non-gamers really won't notice much difference though. Both phones charge at 45 watts over a cable and both last comfortably through a whole day or even 2 days with light use. The Pixel's slightly larger 5200 mAh battery gives it a bit more headroom compared to the Galaxy's 5000 mAh in theory. But in our YouTube HD battery drain test, the opposite is true. At max brightness, the Galaxy S25 Ultra lasts a whole 26 hours and 15 minutes, while the Pixel manages an underwhelming 19 hours. The results aren't directly comparable since the Pixel 10 has a brighter display, but even in last gen, Pixel 9a got a better score. Where Google does really pull ahead is in wireless charging. The Pixel supports Qi 2.2 with a new feature called Pixel Snap. That means you get 25-watt wireless charging speeds and native support for magnetic accessories. The Galaxy still maxes out at only 15 watts and has no MagSafe capabilities, but you can always buy a phone case with built-in magnets for the same function. Durability is another story. According to the new EU battery cycle rating, Samsung's battery is good for around 2,000 cycles before dropping to 80% of its original capacity, while Google Pixel is only rated for 1,000 cycles. The software might be the most important difference of all. Samsung ships the Galaxy S25 Ultra with One UI 7 based on Android 15, while the Pixel comes with its clean Android 16 experience. Both promise 7 years of software updates, which is excellent news for long-term buyers. Samsung gives you more customization options and extra features, but it also installs a lot of apps you might never touch, while Google keeps things simpler with stock Android and a focus on AI. Pixel exclusive features like call screening and live call translation actually work well in practice and can change how you use your phone. The live translation feature in particular is impressive. It translates both sides of a phone call in real time with natural sounding voices, and the language selection, while being limited, shows a lot of potential. Samsung does include its own AI tricks like editing tools in the Gallery app, but they don't really feel as polished as what Google is offering. If AI matters to you, then the Pixel is far ahead. Both companies also offer desktop modes for connecting your phone to an external monitor. Samsung's DeX is more mature, but Google's beta implementation is surprisingly functional and shows a lot of promise. You can run Chrome in true desktop mode, use split-screen multitasking, and even rely on keyboard shortcuts. There are still plenty of bugs like display scaling issues and app crashes, but it is a strong first step. Small details matter. The Pixel has stronger, more precise haptics, which feel great when typing or navigating the interface. Its buttons also feel clickier, while Samsung's are sturdier and more premium. Both have under-display ultrasonic fingerprint scanners, but Samsung's is minimally faster. But the Pixel's facial recognition is a bit more secure, with Class 3 biometric certification that puts it on the same level as Apple's Face ID. Samsung only meets Class 2, which means it cannot be used in banking apps or other high-security apps. Then there's the S Pen. It may not be essential for everyone, but having a built-in stylus makes the Galaxy S25 Ultra feel pretty unique. You can take quick notes, draw diagrams, or mark up screenshots in a way that no other mainstream flagship allows. So Samsung fans won't like hearing this, but the Google Pixel 10 Pro XL actually matches or beats the S25 Ultra in a couple areas. Google's clever AI features, its cleaner Android experience, and its very competitive camera system make it feel smarter and more personal in daily use. Add in the Qi 2.2 support with Pixel Snap, and it's clear that Google has some real advantages. But Samsung still has the lead in raw power, making it the better pick for gamers and power users. Taking video footage is smoother, and you can't forget about that S Pen. The S25 Ultra's battery longevity also suggests that it will age more gracefully if you plan to keep it for more years. This year, the Pixel might not have stolen the crown outright, but it has definitely secured a spot for itself at the top. If you don't need the ultimate performance and want a flagship phone that actually has useful AI features, the Google Pixel 10 Pro XL is a solid choice.